I just thought it would take 10 seconds or so and just settle in. Before we get started in the conversation, I just wanted to just check in quickly. It was an amazing experience for me this morning listening to the other speakers. Just a profound sense of incompetency came over me. Listening to Roshi Joan, like, whoa. And just realizing that, oh my God, I don't have any slides. Right? Like, what are we going to say? And a profound gratitude. We are so fortunate, the teachers that we have. It's amazing. Those with whom I'm close, and I see Chuck here. Chuck and I travel to Tibet together. Sometimes when you go to a place like Tibet, right, you forget how fortunate we are in the West, because we get these teachers. And so many of the people, so many of the cultures that gave birth to these wisdom traditions for political and economic reasons don't actually have the same access that we have. And so I just had that reaction, and I just thought it would be helpful to just share that in the moment. So, hi.
Hi.
It's so awesome to be with this dude, this guy. He, can I reveal our coach?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, in addition to everything else, Matt and I have worked together as coach and client, which really means teacher and student. Right? Those of you who coach know what I mean. For, I guess, 6 years now. And one of the gifts that you have as a coach is to witness the arc of someone's journey. And that's what I thought we would talk a little bit about today, is the arc of the journey. And one of the things that I personally enjoy in these kinds of conferences isn't the theoretical constructs, as powerful as they are. And Roshi Joan, I've stolen grace, so I don't know if I'll credit you, but because it's amazing. But really, what that personal journey has been like. And I thought it would be helpful to talk about a basic construct here, which is that there's a relationship between who we are on an inner basis and how we are in the world externally. And that my friend and teacher Parker Palmer is fond of saying that when his inner is crosswise with his outer, or his outer is crosswise with his inner, that tends to lead to his depression. And I like that construct. And so I was curious about spending time with you, Matt, to talk a little bit about the relationship between your own inner journey, sometimes manifested in a practice, sometimes not, although I guess it's all practice, right? And then really the relationship with the exterior. First Etsy as the for-profit entity, and now in this arc of the journey, or this part of the journey, the nonprofit. You game for that?
Sure.
So, if you can, take us back a little bit in time and take us back to the relationship between who you were and that crazy group that came up with this idea of Etsy. And how does it, looking backwards, how might it have been a reflection of who you were or are? Did that make grammatical sense? Okay.
It's like public therapy or something.
Anybody listen to my podcast, you know what I'm going to do.
I guess a little bit of the backstory. So Rob Kalin, who's the guy who founded Etsy, who had the idea for Etsy, was my roommate. We lived together with my girlfriend at the time and one of my bandmates in an apartment in Brooklyn. And I was getting out of the music business just because I wanted to stop touring, and I wasn't getting along with the co-founder of the band. And Rob said, "Oh, why don't you come and work on this thing with me?" And I'm like, "Well, what would I do? You know, I'm not a programmer." And he's like, "You can do marketing." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about marketing." And he'd be like, "Well, you'll be perfect then." So I came on to Etsy as the marketing person when we were just 4 people. And didn't really know anything about marketing, read some books about marketing, and immediately was like, that seems really awful. I don't want to do any of that. I find a lot of this actually morally questionable. So how do I do something different? And so what I did is really just it was funny. I wanted to stop touring, and I just immediately started touring again, but going community to community and just meeting the women who were using Etsy. And I say women because it really is mostly women, 90% women that are actually selling on the platform. And at this point, there was maybe a couple thousand sellers. It wasn't a very big platform. Now there's about 1.6 million or something like that. But it's worth noting that there wasn't a real business plan for Etsy in the beginning. There wasn't a bunch of people coming out of business school saying there's a lot of opportunity in the craft and hobby vertical, and Rob.
We're going to disrupt the craft business.
Rob was making things. We had a screen printing business together. He had never had a real job before. And he wanted to sell something that he made and said, I don't want to put it on eBay because eBay is so ugly. I actually want to make something beautiful. And he wanted to make his own website, realized that everybody was making things, and said, I'll make a website for people who make things. And that was the idea behind Etsy. There wasn't a real deeper mission than that at the time. I remember, Etsy, to this day, we have the same model. It's 20 cents to list an item, 3.5% commission when it sells. The 3.5% comes actually from Rob asking me, well, what does it cost to sell on eBay? I'm like, I don't know, 4%? He's like, we'll be 3.5%. It wasn't like, let's model that out 10 years and see what happens, But anyways, I say all this because there wasn't this real mission-driven focus for the organization. So that's not to say that we didn't have a strong sense of ethics or what values that we brought to the world. And when I look back at the mission statement of Etsy, there was always some sort of political or social message to what we were trying to do. The first marketing that I did for Etsy was a screen printed poster because I knew how to screen print. Like, smart guy, let's market this digital product by hand printing posters and putting them all over town. But as a kid throwing a rock at a factory, and it said "end mass production," so that was definitely the spirit. So I did a whole bunch of different things at Etsy, but a couple key moments, and this is the long answer to your question, Jerry.
Loving it. It's giving me a chance to write questions.
Oh, good. In 2007, we read Deep Economy by Bill McKibben. And that was, I think, a pretty pivotal point for me anyways. I hadn't really been reading about local economies or any of these things, and he put into words a lot of what we were thinking and seeing with Etsy. That led me to the work of E.F. Schumacher, and particularly Small is Beautiful. At the same time, I was, I think the first book on Buddhism that I read was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And that really resonated with me too. So all of these things kind of converged, as well as just going out and actually, continuing to meet with the people who were using our site, and realizing that our business was having important impact in their lives in ways that weren't just economic. And all of these things kind of converged probably with the birth of my first son in 2010, where I was like, okay, what am I doing with my life? I think we're doing a lot of great things with Etsy, but I know I need to be doing something that's of service to make this world better. And I started thinking about running for political office, starting nonprofits, all these things. And I was like, wait, why, I'm never going to have the chance that I do right now with Etsy, with the audience that we have. How can I, make these things kind of align? And so our mission evolved, and I'm not saying I'm solely responsible for this. It was, a conversation that continued throughout the company. But we're saying, what's the real purpose of our business? And what had started as, a marketplace to buy and sell handmade things, we started to think about this as a platform for building, more connected human-scale economies, and actually thinking about this as a platform for not just these small businesses, but for building this new kind of economy. And so we changed our mission statement at that point to reimagine commerce in ways that build a more fulfilling and lasting world, right? So how do we actually do business in ways that are not just more durable from a social, ecological, and economic point of view, but ones that are actually more joyful and more connected. At this point, I'd moved to Berlin. I was running our international operations from there for a couple of years. And Rob left the company. Chad became our CEO. I moved back to Brooklyn and started working with Jerry. I guess I was still already started working with Jerry when I was in Berlin. I was coming back to New York regularly. But Chad asked me to take over marketing again at Etsy. And at this point, I really didn't like marketing. Nothing against it. I know it's important and all that. But
you hated it.
Yeah. But I was less interested in email open rates and those kinds of things, and more about the real connections that we could create with the platform, which is hard to quantify from a marketing point of view, and I don't think necessarily needs to be quantified. Anyways, so with the help of the coaching from Jerry and exploring some of the ways that fear was keeping me from actually the convergence of myself and my business and all of these things, I put forward a proposal to say, well, if we really want to actually be this engine for impact, it needs to be someone's job to steward it, not someone's job to do it, right? That's CSR at a typical company where you have your business and then over here, like, you clean up parks and give some money to charity or whatever, right? This is really more about how do we use the business as the engine for impact and work across the company to give everybody not just the tools, but hopefully the desire to make decisions that maximize benefit for everybody in this system that we're hitting. So I did that for the last few years at Etsy, and then when we knew that we were going to go public, we saw it was an opportunity to pre-endow a different entity with stock, and Chad asked me to figure out what that would be, and that's what led to Etsy.org, which is, and we can talk more about it later if we want, but I was taking that mission and saying, if we're trying to reimagine how business is practiced, we need to reimagine how it's taught. We need to change what we're teaching entrepreneurs, how we're teaching, who the teachers are, who the students are. And there's something that David Orr once wrote that was something to the extent of the skills, aptitudes, and attitudes needed to industrialize the earth are different from those that will be needed to heal the planet, build durable economies, and good communities. So I started thinking about what are those skills? Like, what do we actually need to be thinking about? And what were the things that were really helpful for me in business? And it wasn't the things I was reading in marketing books. It was actually the stuff that I was reading in Buddhist books or in permaculture books, or just by doing, mostly, where I learned pretty much everything. So how's that?
That was pretty good, huh?
Thanks.
Pretty good. He's a good guy. So recognizing that there's a great human tendency to ex post facto apply a story and a narrative that ties everything up. Recognizing that tendency, I was struck, as I often am, by the frequency of words like connection, congruency. Roshi Jones spoke about those things even this morning. And the notion of some changes happening in your own life. Francis, your oldest, being born, shifting back and forth, Berlin and Brooklyn, figuring out where things were, and then, again, recognizing, too, that you are not the sole embodiment of the mission, and yet you were a factor in the refinement of that mission over time. I just want to acknowledge the relationship between this sort of inner exploration and then this sort of outer exploration. You know, reading Schumacher and really expanding into that and seeing if there's a way to have that which is going on inside of you relate outward. Is that a fair description of what was going on?
Yeah, for sure. You know, it was interesting is that I guess for me it was a lot about fear. Fear played a very big part of you know, keeping me from doing business in ways that are unusual and beautiful. I always think about this idea of business as usual and business as unusual. Business as usual is destroying the world. Business as unusual could heal the world. And you know, having no formal business education, of course, I was like, well, who am I to say that? Like, I feel like such an imposter, you know, like this is crazy, you know, this isn't the best practice. And I always feel like it's you have to be, you know, courageous on some level to challenge the best practice and say, actually, no, you know, my heart is telling me something differently or something different. And or that fear of not only recognizing that you are an intuitive person, but the fear to actually listen to your intuition, or overcoming the fear of listening to your intuition. So I think what I had been feeling on a personal level was disconnection was the only way to really think about it. I was feeling a lot of disconnection just from, like, you know, nature, community, all of these things. That's what led me to start exploring Buddhism. And I guess the more I kind of explored that, the less willing I was or able to be in that disconnected state. And so I had to overcome those fears to actually connect these things, because that's what I felt was needed. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
It better than the question was itself.
Okay, great.
The answer. You know, I'm just struck by the line you just used about, you know, you had to do this. You know, that there's again, thinking about Parker Palmer and the effect of his work on my own life, and the beautiful book Let Your Life Speak, which I read in 2002, and really was the beginning of a process of me reclaiming my own life. This notion of vocation not being something that is divine per se, that is external to us, but some deep, deep, deep within us speaking to us, saying, listen, sucker, you have no choice but to. Because to do otherwise is too deadly. And that's what I resonated with mm-hmm. that line. I have to do this. Even and notice we're not talking about success or failure of the performance of the business. You know, in a sense, it feels like we're talking about a redefinition of success, or an expanded notion of success. Does this resonate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, you know, for me, it was just the recognition that, yeah, I've got this time here, you know, in this form, and how do I want to spend that time? And you know, I remember with Jerry's help, I essentially wrote a letter to Chad, who was the new CEO at the time, saying, I really shouldn't be the marketing person, which is scary because that was my job. And I had a kid and, a wife and bills just like everybody else. And, it's a scary thing to say, like, I'm not good at my job and I don't want this job. What I do want is this, which is an unusual thing. Like, most companies didn't have that role. I was making it up. Even more horrifying was when he said yes. And I was like, oh man, I have no idea how to do this. And I went through that same process. But I also knew that I just, had to find that vocation and pursue it. And I'm recognizing, of course, how lucky I was to work at a company that valued these things, a company that could afford to pay someone to do these things. I know not everybody has that luxury, and it does matter if the company is sustainable financially too, right? Because especially for a company whose mission is about having the impact that the company has. If the company doesn't make money, then there's 1.6 million businesses that are reliant on that company that are also failing too. So that is important. So I just want to recognize that I know I'm very lucky. I feel incredibly lucky to have essentially been making up my own jobs for the last 20 years at this point. And yeah.
So we're gonna start to shift and open it up, and there'll be microphones passed around because it starts to get boring even to me to listen to my own voice. But before we do that, I see my friend Jeff Walker here, and I'm in listening to Matt, Jeff, I remember coming to you in 2002. Jeff and I were colleagues and worked together at JP Morgan, and before that we had worked together for, I guess, since '96. And Jeff was a powerful friend and an important mentor in my life. But coming to you and basically saying something similar, which was, I can't do this anymore. Even though, unlike Matt, I was actually good at my job.
I was great at my job. I
was okay. But to sit down with a friend and he was a boss, but it was never really that kind of relationship. But to feel a kind of almost disappointment because you develop community when you're together, and you build things together, and to say to a partner, and not just Jeff, but I had a partner, Fred Wilson, before that, to say, I don't know what it is that's next, but this thing is not me. This is a suit of clothes that doesn't fit me, and to say that and to step into a leadership position from that, it's hard. It's really scary. It's really scary. So I don't know yet. I'm aware of our time. If there are questions, we're welcoming pop-up questions, and there are microphones here. So, and if not, we'll just keep going. Yeah, there's a question up front. And I've been asked to do the calling on, even though it kind of feels weird.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Christian Simamora. I'm from Oakland by way of Brooklyn, and I work for Dalai Lama Fellows. And I just want to say that I'm personally moved by what you're doing at Etsy.org. This notion of moving business towards a regenerative model is, it's really given me a sense of the possibility of the future. And I'm on your blog all the time to see if there's new content, and I'm wondering if you might be able.
Sorry about that. But we're busy actually running the thing.
Exactly. And if I understand correctly, you're actually in the middle of your first pilot, and I'm wondering if you might be able to share a story. I know the power of stories to really shift mindsets that you've seen that's really moved you from Etsy.org.
Sure. Thank you for that. Just a little bit more context about Etsy.org. So I talked a little bit about it. One of the things that I found when I was doing the values and impact job, I was pretty active in the B Corp community, a member of the Social Venture Network, a lot of these places where I was meeting some really wonderful entrepreneurs, but I kept seeing everywhere in business this optimization for less bad, and this optimization for the world we want to avoid, not the world that we actually want to live in. And I started thinking that we needed to set our sights a little bit higher, that we shouldn't even necessarily be aspire to sustain the world that we've built right now, how do we actually build something beautiful, something that actually creates positive benefit for all. So I got really interested in this notion of what regenerative entrepreneurship could mean. And to me, it's about, kind of what Roshi Joan was saying this morning too. It's that systems thinking, recognizing that we are part of these interconnected, interdependent systems, and aiming to have net positive impact in all the forms of capital you create for all those parts of the systems, including yourself, right? That it's also about doing it from a place where you're actually regenerating the self too. So, pulling in my own experience and what I learned from Jerry. So we have spent the last about 6 months or more developing an approach to business education that hopefully imparts, or rather helps a group of entrepreneurs working together to surface the wisdom that they have inside, to recognize this interconnection and interdependence. And we feel that the best way to make that happen, or maybe the easiest way, is to focus on businesses that are place-based businesses working in a single place. So small to medium-sized bakeries, barber shops, whatever it may be, rather than a tech incubator or something like that. So we really want to go deep on place, try to shift notions of what success looks like to what we do, scale deeply rather than just become as big as possible. So we, with the help of Chuck and Jerry and lots of other people, we're just developing this curriculum that I felt like we could have spent 100 years working on and not have it right at all. And so at a certain point I said, well, let's just do it. Let's just try it and see what happens. So we recruited a cohort of 23 entrepreneurs in New York City. And we have a dancewear manufacturer in the Bronx who's been in business for 40 years. We've got a bakery in Greenpoint who employs 50 people. We have a woman in Brooklyn who's starting an organic cotton underwear company because she has an autoimmune disease that actually in her clothes were making her sick. And so all of these really just different, very diverse cohort in every way: gender, ethnicity, race, size of business experience, whatever it may be, but all aiming to actually use business as a tool to regenerate the communities they're in New York City. So I think one of the couple of the moments thus far. So we're 8 weeks into this 16-week program. The 16 weeks is kind of like the 3.5% of Etsy. It's sort of arbitrary. We just were like, oh, we do this and this and this. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, 16 weeks. That's how long it's going to take to do these things. I'm also realizing that we'll probably never replicate it exactly the same way. It's always going to be based on the place and the people who are part of it, because so much of it is emergent from the people that are there. But I'd say some of the most profound things for me so far, we spent a day at Greyston Bakery with Bernie Glassman and Mike Brady, who's the CEO there, and actually met some of the employees whose lives have been changed through their open hiring policies, which is actually a pretty simple thing. I don't know if you know about it, but Greyston Bakery has an open hiring. Oh, you know all about Greyston Bakery. Chuck used to be the
CEO of Greyston. That's
yeah. Greyston to me is an example of a real regenerative business, right? They have this open hiring policy where they have a list. Anyone can walk in their door, put their name on a list. You can be homeless. I'm sure Chuck can talk about the challenges of doing that too, but when a job comes up, they call the next name on the list, and then that person comes and the job is theirs. Then they take the profits that they make and invest them into affordable housing, childcare, path making for the entrepreneur, for the workers in the bakery. So really powerful, really rooted in place in Yonkers, right? It's been there since 1982, and it's making a meaningful, long-lasting, deep impact. So we went up there, and I think hearing from Bernie was really inspiring for the entrepreneurs, but also just hearing the stories of the workers has prompted a lot of the businesses to say, well, why couldn't I do this actually? I could do an open hiring policy or path making. And so what's been really cool about the program that we've been running is that the participants are learning by just experiencing all these things and then applying it directly to their real businesses. So these aren't theoretical, like we're building widgets in a widget factory, like what would that look like? It's like, okay, well let's just start doing this tomorrow in our businesses. So a lot of them are actually making tangible shifts in their businesses and their business models with this idea of actually regeneration of place and questioning at least the notion of what success looks like. So I think it's early to say what's going to happen, but the other thing that's been really wonderful for me is to realize what a hunger there was for this kind of educational experience. And obviously people are self-selecting who apply to the program, but there was a lot of finally, there's something like this. So it's been really encouraging so far.
I just want to quickly add on to something and just point something out. So most of my work is focused around technology-related entrepreneurs. And there's a meme that goes on right now in the tech industry. Some of you may have heard of this, which is to refer to a billion-dollar valuation company as a unicorn. And has anybody heard this? Yeah. And I can't tell you the destructive impact of this. Because what ends up happening is that people who perceive themselves as the company being less than a unicorn status are somehow failing. In fact, I have a client who raised $150 million at only a $950 million valuation and felt depressed. Okay? And when I listened to my friend and now fellow trustee at Naropa talk like this, right, my heart just eases a little bit. Now, we don't know if Etsy.org is going to succeed. We don't know, whatever success means. But I'd rather die trying at this kind of notion of creating businesses and startup organizations that tilt at that particular windmill. The unicorn windmill. How's that for a mixed metaphor? Other questions? Up in front here. Yep. And if you can stand, I think there may be a mic coming up to you. And if we could start moving mics, there was a hand back here. If we can start moving mics, that might speed things along too. Hi.
Hi, Matt. I was wondering, thinking back to when you were a young boy, what, if you could think of a specific event or time in your life or person that influenced you into this kind of path of consciousness and mindfulness and compassion?
See, we were going to turn it into a therapy.
Wow, yeah, that's a hard question.
Yes! Naropa grad, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface this by saying that, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd be sitting here on this stage at this conference. I'm from DC, actually. I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian, so it's nice to be close to home, anyways, in wonderful Crystal City. Is this where?
Next to the Pentagon room.
Yes, I spent a lot of formative years at the Pentagon. No, I didn't. But so, actually, it's interesting. Both my parents worked in. My father ran the Community Foundation in Washington, actually, and my mother has worked for the last, 25 years at a school in the area working with developmentally disabled children. So I guess it was always kind of part of our world. But, even in high school, I was a professional musician. I played, this is a really funny fact. One of the entrepreneurs in our cohort, I played her prom at the Holton Arms School in 1993. Yeah. So, I never imagined that, but I also have always had a real, I was an activist in high school at Oberlin. I actually ran the Democratic Socialists organization there. And so I was always engaged with these kinds of things. So, it's not that I met one person who kind of sent me on a path. It's really been more of just a kind of cumulative experience. And, you know, the one thing that I feel like I have that can be good and bad is an ability to not hold too tightly to things, which I think is generally actually a really positive thing, especially in business. I say it can be bad because, you know, sometimes I worry, I'm like, shouldn't I be a little bit more sentimental about this? But I've always just kind of gone with the flow and used everything as an example, as an experience to learn and just be open to whatever the world kind of brought me. And so that openness, I feel, has brought me on a path rather than I had this path laid out after I met, you know, this spiritual leader or something like that. So it's all just been very emergent for me. And if you stay open to that, you know, I have no idea where it'll take me, which is fun. But it's only looking back that I start to see, oh, this actually, there was some like logical trajectory to this. But, you know, it still feels kind of arbitrary to me.
So one quick thing, I know who the little boy in the poster is, throwing a brick at the factory. We may know who it is too. We have time for one more question really fast. Yeah, up front here. Yeah. Yeah, we've got a mic coming to you. And I've already gotten the 2-minute warning, so.
Okay, just I'm a coach, so of course I'm curious. Was there a question or a moment that you recall in your work with Jerry that had you think differently? Sorry.
The answer better be yes.
Not really. No. Yeah, you know, luckily Etsy was paying for it. No. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole experience. You know, I think there have been so many benefits for me from working with Jerry, and I think you know, he has an incredible ability to not just give you answers, which I think is what a good coach does, and help you surface that from within and recognize actually maybe, you know, that truer self, right? That Jerry sometimes talks about this process of self-actualization. I think that I couldn't have self-actualized without Jerry pushing me to, you know, write that letter to Chad or whatever it may be, to admit, you know, that I wasn't really happy doing what my job was doing. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for that. But I can't think of one specific moment. But, you know, something that Jerry does that's really great is he doesn't let you off the hook. You'll be like, so what do you think about that? Like, well, yeah, I think that's bad. He's like, really? And then you go deeper and deeper. You're like, well, okay, all right. And then it's like, okay, I'm scared. Okay, you know, it's like.
It's all my mother's fault, okay?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I just want to please join me in thanking Matt for
thanks to
being
Jerry.
so.